Hello, my name is Adam Day. I'm the Director of Programs at the Center for Policy Research, a think tank within the UN University. I was the lead author of a 2019 report assessing the effectiveness of the UN mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, which we conducted with the Effectiveness of Peace Operations Network. I've been asked to give an overview of the main findings of the report, even though they may be slightly outdated, and some more recent impressions of the UN's role in the peace process today. The first area we looked at was the protection of civilians, and we found definitive impact, which is really what we're looking for in the Effectiveness of Peace Operations Network. By providing space within its compounds to those fleeing brutal and widespread violence in 2013 through 2016, UNMISS provided immediate physical protection to more than 200,000 people, including large numbers of women and children. In the view of a wide range of experts that we interviewed in South Sudan and South Sudanese citizens, UNMISS's protection of civilian sites not only saved 10,000s of lives, they also had the positive effect of isolating highly polarized communities from one another at a time when even broader violence was likely. One of our interviewees in South Sudan said, without UNMISS, there would have been a genocide here. Now, of course, the POC sites come at a price, and the majority of UNMISS's military component at one time or another has been employed providing perimeter security to the sites, leaving fewer resources for patrolling conflict-prone areas. So with more than 2 million people displaced within the country and large at-risk populations spread across the enormous terrain of South Sudan, many within the UN and elsewhere have argued that UNMISS could better use its resources by focusing its deployment beyond the POC sites. And this has created a dilemma for UNMISS. While the sites may only hold a small portion of the vulnerable people in South Sudan, they're unequivocally providing that protection, both physical and humanitarian, to large numbers of people. In contrast, we found little concrete evidence that patrolling more broadly necessarily deters violence or reduces threats in conflict-prone areas. We did find some evidence that the creation of static temporary sites, like the one in Ye, does appear to contribute to a reduction in risks. So moving forward to today, UNMISS continues to grapple with the dilemmas posed by the POC sites. The mission's been working to transition the sites from UN-run facilities alongside UN bases into government-run IDP camps. To date, they've redesignated the sites in Bor, Wau, and Juba without serious incident. Now, this is a fraught and a complex process with strong views by many sides, including within the POC site population and the humanitarian community, which we interviewed at the time. The second mandate area we looked at was facilitating humanitarian delivery. And here we found that UNMISS's provision of protection for humanitarian convoys allowed access to at least 100,000 vulnerable people during the civil war and its aftermath. And particularly given the difficult terrain and accessible parts of South Sudan, this role in helping humanitarians reach their destination safely shouldn't be underestimated. Now, the third area we examined within UNMISS's mandate was human rights. And serious human rights abuses during the Civil War demonstrated that parties on all sides of the conflict chose to inflict horrific harm on hundreds of thousands of innocent people who they associated with their enemies. One study estimated that 382,000 people died as a direct and indirect result of the conflict, although the majority direct, while tens of thousands of people were subjected to sexual violence. And the sheer scale of the violence really puts into perspective any claims about protection that we make in this study. It's always difficult to measure the impact of human rights investigations and reporting, but we found that some of the very high-profile reports by the UN did provide a good basis to urge restraint directly with the parties and perhaps played some deterrent effect. But some of the most interesting impacts we found were actually in the more technical and unseen support that UNMISS's rule of law section was able to achieve. With really only a dozen staff and operating on a very small budget, the rule of law section helped the South Sudanese judicial system double the caseload of sexual crimes in 2018 alone, and to develop a mobile court that has successfully tried hundreds of people accused of serious violence in and around the POC sites. And I think this kind of behind the scenes work may have been successful in large part because it was done quietly and out of the spotlight, which may offer some lessons to other missions. And finally, but certainly not the lowest in importance, has been UNMISS's support to the peace process. This has always been a difficult area to assess across the Effectiveness of Peace Operations Network, given how many other players are involved, the relatively minor role of the UN in the peace agreements of 2015 and 2018. Now, we did find some qualitative evidence that the UN's shuttle diplomacy amongst the parties, its logistical support to talks, and its push for a more inclusive approach to the revitalized peace process played a role in helping move the process forward a bit. In our work, we also encountered several dilemmas facing UNMISS. On protection, the mission has clearly been faced with the difficult question of how to address the immediate protection needs of those in POC sites, while also balancing its responsibilities towards the other civilians in South Sudan. Really, the dilemma of needing to operate with the host state's consent while protecting 10,000s of people from state security services is nowhere more acute than in UNMISS, and lessons about dealing with difficult governments should be learned from this mission, I think. And this really raises the issue of short versus long-term stability, and it's a dilemma for UNMISS. Keeping people in the POC sites may suit some of their immediate needs, but the POC sites also stand as a clear reminder to everyone that the peace process hasn't moved forward enough. And continuing to transition the sites could help build confidence in the peace process, but it also raises another thorny issue. Because if UNMISS continues to help thousands of POC site residents go to other areas, maybe rural areas where they're in the majority and where they might not be at immediate risk, could the UN be facilitating a sort of homogenization of certain areas of the country, maybe reducing the kind of urban ethnic mixing that had happened before the conflict and the kind of coexistence that might help repair some of the deep social divides in the country? And this is a real dilemma that the UN continues to deal with, and its partners as well. So I think really my final point will be about the leadership of UNMISS. And our team was just so impressed by the strategy that SRSG David Shearer and his team had put in place. It was one where the highly localized civil affairs work was clearly connected to the broader peace process, where the short versus long-term issues were really well articulated, and where I think all mission components could see themselves in their work reflected. It's not always easy to make a claim for impact when it comes to the UN's work, but we can certainly make some very strong claims about the importance of good leadership in a place like South Sudan. And I think the team led by SRSG Shearer really embodies that kind of good leadership that is making a difference in peacekeeping. And so with that, I will thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the Challenges Forum.